I remember the first time I stepped into that flat. It was supposed to be a fresh start for Jamie and me. The walls whispered stories of 1,000 lives before ours, but we were ready to write our own chapter. Or so we thought. The first few days were uneventful, just unpacking boxes and debating where to hang our favorite art. But then came the rules. A note slid under our door late one night, eerie in its specificity. No food scraps, no lift between 1:11 and 3:33 a.m. Trust me. We laughed it off, thinking it was some overzealous neighbor or an urban legend meant to spook the new tenants. Jamie even joked about taking the lift at exactly 1:12 a.m. just to see what would happen. We didn't know that would be the last joke he'd ever make. 2 nights later, Jamie went missing. The lift doors closed behind him, and I never saw him again. I screamed his name, banged on every neighbor's door, but no one answered. The building had swallowed him whole, and I was left to face the silence. Morning brought Ian, the postman, a man who seemed as much a part of the building as the peeling wallpaper and creaky floors. He wasn't surprised when I told him about Jamie. Instead, he sighed, as if this had happened before. "The creatures," he said. "They're tied to the lift. Always hungry, always waiting. We struck a deal years ago. Keep the lift off limits during their feeding hours, and they'll leave us alone." Jamie broke the rule. He described them, rodent-like but grotesque, almost human in their shape. Rows of sharp teeth and a hunger that never ends. "They're manageable," Ian said, "as long as you follow the rules. Don't leave food out. Don't use the lift at night." His words were supposed to comfort me, but they left me colder than the draft seeping through the windows. Days turned into weeks. I stayed in the flat, clinging to the hope that Jamie might somehow return. Georgia, my best friend, tried to help. She stayed with me one night, and for the first time since Jamie vanished, I felt a glimmer of safety. But safety is an illusion in this building. That evening, Georgia invited Natalia, a neighbor, into the flat. Natalia claimed to live in flat 71, but something about her felt wrong. Her smile never reached her eyes, and her presence made my skin crawl. Then I remembered the note. If someone claims to live in one of these flats, shut and lock the door immediately. But it was too late. Natalia was already inside. Before I could react, Georgia began to scream. Her skin blistered and blackened as if invisible flames were consuming her. Natalia's gaze locked onto mine, cold and unfeeling. I grabbed a knife from the counter, ignoring the blistering heat radiating from its handle, and plunged it into Natalia's throat. Black ichor poured from the wound, but she didn't die. She simply stood, unbothered, cauterized the wound with a touch, and walked toward the lift. Georgia wasn't as lucky. Her body was burned beyond recognition, but she was alive, barely. I couldn't risk calling the authorities, so I left her in a nearby park with no ID or phone. It was a betrayal I'll carry forever, but I couldn't let the building claim me too. The flat was empty again. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards. I thought about leaving, packing up and never looking back. But this was Jamie's home. Our home. If there was even a chance he was alive, I couldn't abandon him. That night, I barely slept. Every sound felt like a threat, every shadow a warning. I thought about Ian's words and the note's cryptic rules. There had to be more to this place, more to the creatures, more to the deal that kept them at bay. And only one person could give me answers: Prudence Hemmings. Prue had lived in the building longer than anyone. Her name was scrawled at the bottom of the note, and Ian had mentioned her in passing. She was the key to understanding this nightmare. I spent hours researching, trying to find her address. By morning, I had a plan. I would visit Prue and demand the truth. The walk to her flat was surreal. The building seemed alive, its walls pulsing with a rhythm I couldn't hear but felt in my bones. Doors creaked open and shut on their own, and the air smelled of damp rot. When I knocked on Prue's door, it swung open as if it had been waiting for me. Prue was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles and her eyes sharp with knowledge. She didn't seem surprised to see me. "You've met them, haven't you?" she asked, her voice raspy but firm. I nodded and she motioned for me to sit. She told me everything. The creatures weren't just tied to the lift, they were tied to the building itself. They had existed for decades, maybe centuries, feeding off the fear and folly of residents who dared to break the rules. The deal was their way of maintaining control, a fragile truce that could shatter at any moment. But why stay here? I asked. Why not leave? Prue's eyes darkened. Because leaving doesn't free you. The building doesn't let you go. It follows you, haunts you as if until you come back or until it takes you. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had nowhere to run, no way to escape. My only option was to survive, to outsmart the creatures and the building itself. Prue handed me a small leather-bound book, its pages filled with notes and sketches. "This will help," she said. "But be careful. Knowledge is power, but it's also a curse." I left Prue's flat more determined than ever. Jamie's fate was still a mystery, but I wouldn't let the building claim me too. Armed with Prue's book and a newfound resolve, I returned to my flat, ready to face whatever horrors awaited me. As I sat on the sofa that night, the damp patch on the ceiling seemed to shift, almost as if it were watching me. The building was alive, and it was waiting. But so was I. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't let the building haunt you too. Like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the Book of the Dread. Because remember, not every book has a happy ending.